Good morning, or maybe afternoon, evening. This is Caroline Seymour. I'm just going to wait a few more minutes, well, not minutes, a few more seconds, maybe 30 seconds, because people are still joining. So if you could just bear with us, I'd appreciate it. Talk to you in a minute. Okay, I think we're good. I think we'll get started, and I'm sure people will continue to join as we move through. So I'm delighted to be here today and to welcome you to the 2022 predictions. And we're going to be talking about five predictions that we see, and then how that what we've been doing in 2020. One to help support what you will need to be successful in 2022. And so with me, though, I have Chris Rogers, who is a technology evangelist on my team. So I'm delighted to have you here with me today, Chris. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, and delighted to be speaking today.
Yeah, and as I say, I'm Caroline Seymour, and I lead the product marketing team here at Zerto. So great to be here. And without further ado, why don't we get started? We've got a lot to cover. So first prediction, let's talk about that. And I think this is no surprise to anybody, is the fact that ransomware is top of mind to all companies that we speak to. And what we're seeing, though, is the need for recovery strategies, and that's a key element. Yes, of course, having the ability to be able to predict and prevent, but also if an attack actually gets through, and to us it's more about when it actually happens, it's do you have the right recovery strategy in place? And so as we've actually looked, and I just wanted to sort of give you a few stats because they're quite alarming, really, in the sense of the sheer cost. And these are still 2020 numbers, and I would expect to see a big increase, and we'll get those numbers and share those out later. But last year alone, the estimated cost was about 20 billion. And the average increase rose significantly. And even though it says 300,000 here, I think that's a little bit low. But a recent stat that I found was this 21 days. What we see now is an average downtime after an attack that has made it through the firewall is about 21 days. That's significant. And if you think about the damage that can have to your reputation, and as well as also the loss of productivity and revenue as well. And so, and you see on the right-hand side, the average cost of recovery is about 1.4 million. And that does include things like the loss of productivity, reputation damage, service disruption, and so forth. So this is considerable. So the question is how do we solve for this? And so I want to first talk to you about a customer, Tenkata Protective Fabrics. And they, a while back, were struck with a Cryptolocker attack that got through their firewalls. And at that time, they were using backup to tape and as well as disk. And it was an entire file server that was actually affected. And because of the nature of the backups and the time that they took the backups, the data loss that they suffered was about 12 hours. And the time to fully recover, took them about 2 weeks. And so that's a significant downtime. And this is, as I say, as they were looking at what they were using. And then they did implement Zerto, and I'll talk about that and what happened shortly after that. But when we think about data protection, and as I've mentioned in the fact that absolutely you need to identify, protect, and be able to detect a cyber event and respond, the data protection side of it, or as you can see here on the right-hand side around data protection, is where Zerto really fits in and excels at. Because if, or rather when, you're attacked and it gets through your firewalls and all the measures that you've put in place, we can help support through the recovery phase. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. As with Tenkata, they were using tape and disk backup. And as you can see here, one of the things that you're reliant on, if you are purely reliant on backups, is the fact of the length of time that you have between the snapshots. And typically what you tend to see is an RPO of hours and a long RTO. Now, most of you who are customers here on this call know in the fact of the value that Zerto brings with near synchronous replication and our journaling technology that allows you to be able to go back to within seconds, so delivering those RPO seconds and RTO minutes. So as we start to look at the real need to include ransomware recovery strategies, Zerto can help you here, and Zerto should be part and parcel of that strategy overall. And if we go back to Tenkata, for example, they shortly after implementing Zerto, they were actually attacked a second time, and this time it was an enhanced version of the Cryptolocker. And what happened was a very different story. They had implemented Zerto. Their directories on a file server were affected, and they only suffered 10 seconds of data loss. And that is, as we've just talked about, the fact that they're using the journaling technology and the asynchronous replication, and it gave them that ability. And the recovery time was less than 10 minutes. So a significant difference between the first time they were attacked using periodic backups to the using continuous data protection. So as we look a little bit closer at why Zerto for ransomware resilience, well, first, as I've talked about, it is about that continuous data protection, being able to have that granular level of recovery. We include fully orchestrated workflows that allows you to recover applications consistently, and at scale for RTOs of minutes. And another very key aspect is the ability to be able to do non-disruptive testing that doesn't impact your production environment. And what's important, I think, in this day and age is to really test and test often to ensure that you can indeed recover from ransomware. And we enable that for you to be able to do that without impacting your production environment. And then lastly is the analytics and compliance reporting to ensure in the fact that you can monitor your applications, the protection status and infrastructure usage for all of the sites and locations that you have. And so what else we've been doing? Earlier this year, we released Zerto 9. And to help to better facilitate and to strengthen the ransomware resilience that we can deliver, we added significant enhancements around our recovery capabilities. And for that, I just want to hand over to Chris to talk a little bit about what we've added in Zerto 9 to help support that. Chris?
Brilliant, thank you, Caroline. Yeah, so as Caroline said a minute ago, so Zerto 9 came out earlier this year, and we added some enhancements for ransomware resiliency and kind of the recovery. So I'm not going to read out these ones on the slide. We're going to go through some more, but as you can see, there's mutability, cloud storage, and auto tiering, instant file restores. Those really, really important things for the customers have been asking for, so we delivered earlier this year. So if we look at the first one, which is the ransomware through immutability, or ransomware resilience through immutability. So this is kind of like that break glass copy. So if everything else fails, we've got a copy out in the cloud in AWS S3 storage that is immutable, that no one else can touch. It also uses different authentication. It's on a completely different storage system. So this is there for when the worst does happen. So if for whatever reason we can't recover using the journal, we can't recover using the journal and the recovery disks we have, this is kind of that copy out in the cloud that no one can touch, no one can get to. So it gives us that peace of mind that if the worst were to happen, then we can kind of recover from that point in time we have. And this is all done through the Zerto interface as well. So we don't have to configure anything outside of Zerto. The immutability is locked from inside of Zerto and controlled from in there as well. So it uses the S3 object lock in Amazon S3 in the protocol there, and it's a worm model. So write once, read many, and then we have audit logging on there as well, so we can see if anyone's tried to get there and who's written and who has access as well. So I think that's a really key feature, having immutable backups in Amazon S3 for us as well. So now if we look at cloud tiering, so it's important to have an offsite backup, an offsite copy of your data as well. Normally with Zerto, customers will have at least one copy offsite, if not multiple copies. But being able to store them for long periods of time can get expensive, especially in public cloud environments. Again, so inside of Zerto, we've managed to add automatic tiering into these public cloud environments. So we can start off putting them into Azure Hot or AWS Standard tier for their object storage, and then on a time-by-time basis, archive those down into cooler or cheaper and deeper storage, and eventually ending up in Glacier or Azure Archive tier to reduce the cost of storing that data for long periods of time. And this is often for archive and compliance reasons, but equally, we want that back from a long time ago, because if ransomware has been in there for a long time, we can pull it back from that period of time as well. So now if we look at the next feature, so the S3 compatible storage for long-term retention. So not everybody wants to use public cloud. And we've recognized that at Zerto and understood that, there's companies like Cloudian and, many others out there that do object storage on premises. So we've included the compatibility for those inside of Zerto to store that in an on-premise S3 environment or in another cloud provider's environment using the S3 protocol as well. So again, giving people more options rather than forcing them down in a particular way and having to use public cloud or having to put their data in a region or an area that they're not particularly comfortable or familiar with. So again, I think adding more options for customers is a great thing there. And then the next one, Caroline, please. Perfect. This is one of my favorite things we added. So the instant ransomware recoveries for local backup and LTR. So using Zerto's one-to-many capabilities, we can replicate to more than one location at a time, which is really, really great because we can have that DR copy, when things do happen in our local location, we can fail over into the secondary environment and then obviously into long-term retention for cloud storage or object storage as well. But we can also have a local continuous copy replicating back to the production site as well, which means we can then use instant VM restore from the journal, which can boot VMs up instantly straight back into the production systems without having to go over to the DR target. Really, really, really valuable. It's actually quick. I've done it quicker than a VMware clone to actually just get that straight back out, straight back into production again. But again, choosing the point in time we want to restore that from. And I think even more importantly for this feature is that we don't lose any journal history while we're doing that. So we can do an instant restore, and we can carry on restoring any of those points in time in the future as well. So just because we do a restore doesn't mean we lose any journal history like we would do if we're doing a failover. So I think that's a really, really important one for customers to think about as well. And that's a little animation of how we do that. So back from long-term retention for the files and back in for the VM straight back in. And again, so automated VM protection, so that's essentially allowing us to tag VMs for protection. And I think one of our taglines for the presentation we did earlier in the year was, leave no VM left behind. So with automated VM protection, we can make sure that as long as everything is tagged in the vCenter environment, Zerto is going to automatically pick that up and automatically replicate that, giving you complete protection. And again, making sure you don't forget to add anything. All you need to do is add it to your build of your virtual machine as a vSphere tag, and that's going to automatically pick up Zerto and add it either to an existing virtual protection group or even creating a brand new virtual protection group depending on the rules that you've got set up inside of Zerto. So again, making sure every workload can have the best possible protection it can do, and automatically as well. And then just a few other bits and pieces to help you manage Zerto a little bit easier. So simplified VPG management as well in the UI. So again, if you've got a large environment, simplifying those views down so you can see what's a backup VPG, what's a disaster recovery VPG, what's a migration VPG. You can see all of those options inside the UI to really simplify your views and kind of understand your environment better. And then we've added new backup reporting into Zerto Analytics. So Zerto Analytics is our SaaS-based analytics service, which comes free of charge to all of our Zerto customers, which lets them view kind of insights and analytical data upon their environment. We've added new backup reporting capabilities into there to make sure your long-term retention copies are getting sent to the cloud properly. We can see exactly how long they've taken to take that copy into the cloud. We can see which ones are immutable and at what point in time they are. So again, just helping you view the environment and helping you understand your environment better, which is going to simplify operations for you in Zerto. So that's kind of what we brought in for Zerto 9 this year to help with ransomware resiliency. So on that note, I'm going to pass back to Caroline for our next prediction for 2022.
Thanks, Chris. And those are significant enhancements to help really support your recovery strategies as you implement for supporting your ransomware resilience. And so prediction number 2 I want to talk about is in-cloud data protection. But before I do that, I was amiss not to mention that if you do have a question as we actually go through, please down at the bottom right, you'll see questions, a little arrow and a questions. You can add your question, and I've got a couple of team members, Sam and Guido, who are on the call that can answer your questions as we go through. And we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So let's just talk about prediction number 2. So in-cloud data protection. So what do we mean about that? Well, first of all, we've seen a significant rise. And I think we all know in the fact that with the event of COVID, it's really accelerated how people are using the cloud and leveraging the cloud more from many different aspects. And I found this recent stat from Gartner where they're predicting that over 45% of IT spending will have shifted to the cloud by 2024. And that's not far away. That's only really another couple of years. And that's up 33% in 2020. So we continue to see this growth around the cloud in the aftermath of COVID-19. And so we've been doing a significant amount as it relates to supporting cloud. And what do I mean by that? And if you look at what we have here, our goal is to help you protect cloud workloads anywhere. And so first of all, the first step is you may be wanting to migrate your workloads to the cloud. So we can help you with that, with migration capabilities that allow you to move to whether it's AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or whatever cloud that you're actually looking at. Secondly, you may want to be thinking about moving your disaster recovery to the cloud and using the cloud as a DR target. And so we allow you to be able to protect your data and your applications with the cloud. And then we've added backup to the cloud, and you've just heard from Chris too, the fact that we've added capabilities this year around immutability and cloud tiering that it'll help again to accelerate that move and to be able to leverage the cloud. And then we've had disaster recovery within cloud on Azure and VMware on public cloud. So if you're using VMware public cloud, you can actually orchestrate protection between clouds. And then earlier this year, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about this because this is another rise that's actually happening, is that we've added disaster recovery backup and also actually mobility for Kubernetes so that you can protect your containerized applications. And so you can see here we've been working and doing a lot to enhance our support to help you protect your cloud workloads and anywhere. But what I do want to spend a few minutes just talking to you about is something that is new, something that we launched last week, which is Zerto In-Cloud for AWS. And what Zerto In-Cloud for AWS, if I have to put it in one simple statement, is what you see here. It's disaster recovery at scale for Amazon EC2 instances. And as I say, we launched this last week. And we were at AWS reInvent, so you may have been there. Or you may have seen the press release, but let me tell you a little bit more about what Zerto In-Cloud for AWS is. But first, let's talk about why we actually developed this and why it's important. Because as we talk to a lot of you, our customers who have got AWS, who have actually now moved workloads into AWS, the need to be able to protect those workloads is accelerating. But there are challenges. One, there is no cloud that is immune from regional or localized outages, so you have to be prepared. And then again, going back to, ransomware, cyber attacks, all these need to be considered. And so therefore, you still need to have protection from disruption. The challenge, though, in an AWS environment is that there are limited backup and recovery capabilities. There are AWS replication capabilities you can use, but the challenge is it's not automated, and it can lack scalability and adds complexity too, which is the third point here. And a lot of the solutions that are out there use agents. And if you use agents and you've got scale that you're trying to scale to a large number of VMs, it gets more complex. And so the whole management and maintenance and testing increases. So these are the three key areas that we set about to resolve with Zerto In-Cloud for AWS. And so first, what we deliver as part of Zerto In-Cloud for AWS is orchestrated disaster recovery. And that is, there are three things here that are important. First is the fact that we deliver fully orchestrated failover live and test and recovery workflows. So that's the first thing. And then secondly is it is absolutely focused on helping you to protect your large complex applications like SAP, for example, where you want to be able to protect and recover as a single entity. So it really focuses on application-centric protection. And then thirdly is around non-disruptive testing. So the ability to be able to ensure that you can implement a failover test of all of the instances, say, in a designated region or zone, and it's isolated from the production, so it's non-disruptive. So getting all the advantages that you have today on the on-prem now within AWS itself. And with the orchestrated DR, obviously that simplifies the management as an ongoing basis. But with Zerto In-Cloud, there is a single Zerto In-Cloud Manager appliance, and there's only the one, regardless of the scale of what you actually have. So if you've got a large deployment, you still only need one. It has a very easy to use GUI, and those of you that are familiar, customers here on the call, are familiar with the Zerto interface. It has the same user management experience as you do today. But it does also have an API-centric management, and we've really referred to this as like DR as code that allows you through API, but also through the CLI integration too. So you have the total flexibility to be able to integrate into your existing operations that you have within AWS. There are no agents with Zerto In-Cloud, so that simplifies the management. And we have secure management with MFA and role-based access as well. So what this is doing is really we focused on eliminating the manual processes to ensure that you can automate and simplify not only the installation and the deployment, but the ongoing management. And we've added in analytics with built-in dashboards, as you're familiar with, so that you can monitor the RPO and the journal and the networking capabilities. And it sets up alerting too to warn you of any conditions as well. So if I look at it in summary, Zerto In-Cloud for AWS, as I say, is disaster recovery at scale. At scale is a very, very important piece to this because we've tested it for large scale. So scalability, scaling from tens to thousands of VMs and petabytes of data. But again, simplicity is a core. It's very core to what we do. So we've ensured in the fact that the implementation and deployment and management with no agents and full DR orchestration. It's flexible and open with the API and CLI integration too, so it'll exist with your existing stack. And we support over 17 regions across 17 regions and availability zones and accounts. And then we deliver the analytics for insights. And so as you look at the picture for AWS, We can migrate your workloads to AWS. We can use AWS as a disaster recovery site. We can back up to AWS and you can leverage all the great features. You can now do disaster recovery within AWS. And we also have disaster recovery and backup for Kubernetes for EKS deployments. And actually, that's a good segue as we look at what our next prediction is, which I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk about. So, Chris?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that. So let's look at next gen data protection. So prediction number 3 for 2022 is around containerization. So as we look at the market trend towards containers, we see a big growth of that in production workloads running on each server type. Over time, we can see that bare metal is slowing down. Virtual machines are also slowing down slightly, but the container world is really taking off. And as more kind of enterprise organizations start adopting containerization, we are going to start coming into some of the Kubernetes challenges that we see in the marketplace today. So some of those are going to be, next slide please, Caroline. Perfect. So some of these challenges is limited backup and recovery. So we know that Kubernetes is pretty much the de facto orchestration platform for containers now. But just because it has orchestration and pieces like that, it doesn't always include backup and recovery. So it has some native HA, and so high availability, and also scaling and things like that. But it doesn't have disaster recovery and data protection built into the platform. So we need to make sure we're adding that in at a later stage, or even as the containers are born. Is lack of purpose-built protection. So a lot of the solutions out there that are saying they can protect Kubernetes data is just doing that. It's protecting the data only, so only the data layer, so potentially only the underlying infrastructure, so the virtual machines that the worker nodes are running on, not actually integrating themselves into the Kubernetes stack. And also there's no application-centric approach for these. So the persistent data must be protected, but it's no good just having the data. We need to make sure we have the whole application. So all the related resources like config, maps, services, and secrets. We need to make sure all of those are protected in a single entity to make sure it is application-centric rather than just being a data-centric approach. So here's where we introduce Zerto for Kubernetes. So what we've done in the VM world when we launched 10, 11 years ago, maybe even 12 years ago now, I can't exactly remember how long it's been. So when we kind of reinvented disaster recovery for virtual machines by putting replication inside of the hypervisor, we've done a very similar thing here for Kubernetes. So continuous backup, disaster recovery, long-term retention and mobility for Kubernetes applications. So we support all the major Kubernetes flavors you can imagine. So AKS, EKS, the Google Kubernetes engine, and more recently even VMware Tanzu as well. So giving people the choice and flexibility of where they'd like to run their applications and not pinning you down to a particular platform or a particular flavor of Kubernetes. We're again agnostic in that vendor approach as well. So if we look at what Zerto for Kubernetes kind of looks like on a single page. So as all the customers on the call will know, everything we do is underpinned by continuous data protection. So Zerto for Kubernetes is no different in this. So continuous data protection is at the key to how we protect Kubernetes applications. And again, I've mentioned application centric. So we are protecting the whole data, so the persistent data that's in those containers, but also everything that goes around it. So the config maps and the secrets, etc., that make up the whole application. We have the simple workflows like you'd expect from Zerto. So the failover live, the failover test workflows that you're used to in Zerto to be able to really orchestrate those platforms under the hood for you. Hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. So again, being able to have a VMware Tanzu on premise and then replicate that up into a cloud environment, giving you kind of the flexibility and scale that you need without having to run two separate infrastructures as well. So we can have that agnostic approach across clouds and across on-premise as well. Deep analytics fed into our analytics platform. So again, from day one when this was launched, we fed all the data into our analytics platform so customers don't have to try and figure out how to view the data differently to VMs. We've put it straight into the same view they're used to in Zerto Analytics. And of course, APIs and automation, they have to be there for Kubernetes application. It's all built around the DevOps community and this continuous integration and continuous development. So we've developed the APIs alongside kubectl, so you can manage Zerto and Zerto for Kubernetes with the existing tool sets that your developers are using today. And then we've also defined this as data protection as code. So you can define inside your application manifests actually how Zerto is going to protect that data. So as soon as the containers are born, they are born protected. So it's not an afterthought, and it's not something that needs to be done by someone else in a different team. The developers can actually put data protection inside their applications, and they're built protected. I think that's a really, really important thing. So next slide, please, Caroline. So again, we're going to look at continuous data protection. So again, we're pretty much known for our continuous data protection in the data protection marketplace. So bringing that inside of Kubernetes is really exciting for us, because we always need always-on replication, especially in containers where VMs may live for weeks, months, years, and sometimes even decades. We've seen VMs live for. Containers can live for a lot less amounts of time. So we need to make sure that replication is happening as quickly as it possibly can. So we're capturing the data at as many intervals as we can before they either spin down or get moved or something else happens to them. So making sure that we replicate all the time gives us that granular journal-based recovery. So being able to recover in those small seconds intervals is going to be really important for developers, because they don't want to lose data as much as anybody does, especially when the data could be changing so much. And this is how we can then be able to unlock RPOs of seconds and RTOs of minutes in Kubernetes environments for customers as well. So I think it's a really important message that as we are looking for data protection towards the future, we don't go back to legacy systems where we're using, snapshots or even worse, agents inside of containers, actually building it inside of Kubernetes and making sure the data protection is continuous. So I've kind of mentioned most of these before, but I'm just going to run through them again. So data protection as code, so it's purpose-built for Kubernetes. As I said, it's built inside of the containers and built inside the actual application when it's built, so not as an afterthought. Again, application-centric, so protecting the application as a whole rather than underlying infrastructure or just the volumes or just the data. Those simple workflows can be triggered by all your automation tools you're using today with the APIs or the kubectl commands that we've put in there as well. Support for your Kubernetes environments on-premise, in the cloud, or between both. I think the whole idea around Kubernetes and cloud native is that we have this option to go wherever we like to go, but being then pinned into a particular platform just because we need it for data protection doesn't seem right to us. So enabling customers to then move to completely different environments, even completely different vendors for your Kubernetes environments, I think could be really powerful. And analytics inside the analytics platform, again, not having to then do anything more to add there. And as we look at the architecture, so we've actually purpose-built Zerto for Kubernetes in Kubernetes. So we've built it inside of containers. So again, we're not running legacy infrastructure or legacy VMs or anything like that to actually run Kubernetes. We built it purpose-built inside of the Kubernetes stack. I won't go through the deep technical parts of the architecture here, but you can see it's very similar to kind of Zerto in its traditional format with virtual replication appliances, and then the Kubernetes manager is a similar concept to the Zerto Virtual Manager. But we've got an easy way to install using Helm, so anyone who knows containers and knows containerizations will be used to using Helm installation charts. So we can install using those, and they're very, very efficient and lightweight components, as you'd expect. So they're actually made up of containerized workloads themselves, and Zerto for Kubernetes runs its own namespace as well, so we don't cross-pollinate everything there. And we can have varying different architectures, so we could have production and a DR cluster. We could have just a production cluster and use it for just backup. The Zerto cluster in the middle can sit in a completely different environment if you wish, away from the data. So it's a very, very flexible architecture, and depending on what you want to achieve, one of our solution architects will be able to tell you the best architecture for your applications and what problems you're trying to solve as well. And on that note, I'm going to pass back to Caroline. Look at prediction number 4. Excellent,
thank you. And so prediction number 4 is around the continuing need to protect SaaS workloads. And this one's an interesting one, because actually by 2022, next year, it's quite an alarming stat here from a Gartner, that 70% of organizations will have suffered a business disruption due to unrecoverable data loss in SaaS application. And I guess you sort of sit there and think, well, why is that? And it's interesting because as you look at backup for SaaS, there's quite sometimes the misunderstanding that people think that the SaaS provider is providing that responsibility of backing up your data. But it's not true, because if you look at what you're seeing here, of what the SaaS provider's responsibility is, it doesn't include the data side of it. So the data, so to protect you from human errors or configuration, malicious attacks such as ransomware, external hackers and so forth, you need to the responsibility is yours to back up from a user data administration perspective, because the SaaS provider is not going to do that. They're responsible if there is an issue from a hardware failure or software failure and so forth, but not your data. So data from a SaaS application is your responsibility. And so to address that and to help organizations is that we launched Zerto Backup for SaaS earlier this year. And this is powered by Keepit. And we released for 4 key SaaS applications: Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics 365. And Zerto Backup for SaaS provides the most comprehensive backup for all of the items as it relates to these individual SaaS applications. So for example, for Microsoft 365, it'll make sure that everything from Teams to your Outlook and everything that's related to it is backed up itself. And one other thing too, and I was going to put this in, we just got notification too as I was talking to Keepit, is that they were nominated as a leader in the Forrester Wave with their solutions. So this is a very solid solution that we're delivering, powered by Keepit. It provides a very granular recovery, and it has unlimited storage and retention, so you can retain data for as long as your compliance requirements require. It has immutability to ensure that you are protected from ransomware. So when we think about some of the challenges, that you look at from a SaaS perspective and how we're solving them with Zerto, if we take each one individually. So there's always the human error. We see those, it's no different than, any application or any system that you actually have. The human error, accidental deletions. There is granular recovery to be able to recover, down to an email or a team site or permission and so forth. It's helping you protect from outages and natural disruptions. So the data is available outside, of your normal production data centers. So it is ensuring in the fact that you can recover if there is, maybe a fire or whatever it happens to actually be. And of course, to ensure that you're meeting your compliance requirements, you can actually configure the retention around your needs as your organization. So there is no limit as to how long you can actually retain your data for. And then lastly, with ransomware, going back to that, which is one of our earlier predictions, is the immutability, so that it has a secure backup of your SaaS applications itself. So as we start to look at why Zerto for SaaS backup, it is ensuring in the fact that you're always protected. As with all of your other applications, now you can actually use Zerto for SaaS backup to protect your SaaS applications from any disruption. And you're dealing with one vendor now, so that you're ensuring in the fact that you have that complete data protection from Zerto. And lastly, what's important here is the simplicity and the secure aspect of it, with immutability against cyber attacks, and to ensure that you are fully compliant. So do take a look at Zerto Backup for SaaS if you have SaaS applications. And then we come to prediction number 5, which is our last prediction, which is about disaster recovery as a service and how that's really accelerating. And I'm going to pass back to Chris, who's going to talk about how and what we're seeing from that perspective and what we're doing. Chris?
Perfect, thank you, Caroline. So as we look at DRaaS, the market's growing massively, so 23% CAGR by 2025, which I think is huge. I think the availability of DRaaS offerings is stretching. I think there's a big spectrum, and we'll look at that later on in terms of what DRaaS offerings look like. But I think as the number of people start realizing that disaster recovery and disaster recovery as a service isn't just for the big natural disasters and big power outages, they are for things like ransomware and those types of outages which are becoming incredibly common now. This DRaaS offers that low cost and low barrier for entry for those people who want a world-leading disaster recovery service. So if we look at the motivations as to why people use DRaaS, so here's a Gartner report. So as we dial closer into these and look a bit closer at some of these reasons, so the top reason is people didn't have a disaster recovery capability before, or they didn't have the staff to provide it. And again, I think that's where DRaaS really comes into its own by providing that that secondary site, that secondary option, and the staff that come along with that as well. But then if we look at a couple of others, disaster recovery capabilities are limited to tape. Having tapes shipped to a storage facility and then brought back to you on a van and loaded up, it's not going to work for ransomware anymore. You're going to be down, for that potentially 21 days that Caroline mentioned earlier in the presentation. That's going to cause huge outage and huge problems for your business. So we need to look to the future and look to, to bigger and better solutions. And if we just look at a few more that are further down the list, three things, avoiding server and storage refresh, previously used for disaster recovery. So people had this, this idea that they could, the old hardware that wasn't really fit for purpose for production anymore, we could lift and shift that into our secondary data and just use that for disaster recovery because, it doesn't need to be as good as production. Well, actually, it needs to be just as good as production, because at some point in time, we're potentially running from there for who knows how long. So, understanding that we can't just use old hardware for disaster recovery has really opened up the disaster recovery as a service market, because they've got platforms and availability that are pretty much unrivaled across their sectors. And things like more frequent testing, they have an ability to test on demand as well. So as we look at this, I'm kind of called what the DRaaS spectrum being the kind of the scale that is DRaaS, and I think there's one size doesn't fit all in this conversation. We have silver, gold, and platinum partners that offer DRaaS, but they all offer varying service and varying levels of protection and varying services. So on the left hand side, we've got things like self-service. I would define this as like they're providing you just a platform, potentially even like a public cloud, right? Self-service, we give you the tooling and some information, but everything's done by you and triggered by you. Then we kind of move into partially managed, so we'll help you set it up, and maybe you get a certain amount of failovers a year, but you're still responsible for making sure that the service is up and running and the bits and pieces are done on your end, and if there's any changes, you let us know and everything else like that. And then we come into like the fully managed side of things, where it's you don't need to worry about disaster recovery at all, Mr. Customer. We'll do everything for you. So we'll set it up for you. We're going to monitor it. We're going to maintain it. We're going to make sure everything's, tested once a month or even once a week. We're going to make sure we provide you with reporting to show you everything's working. So no matter kind of where you're after, or where your industry is, or where your company is in terms of, how many staff you've got, your budgets, or what you're trying to achieve with DRaaS, I think there's definitely going to be a partner and offering out there. Based upon Zerto, I like to say we have 350 plus service providers around the world offering these services in many different ways. There's going to be a partner out there that's helped you. So if we look at some of the reasons, why we're industry leading in the DRaaS space. So, we're trusted, as I said, by 350 plus managed service providers worldwide, but not just trusted as a partner, but we're trusted to protect their customers' mission critical data. So we are the tooling that they have chosen to protect their customers' most valuable asset, which is their data. So we feel really, really honoured and well received in that space to understand that we are the ones that are holding up their reputations for not just them, but also their end customers as well. And if we look at the most recent Gartner MQ for DRaaS, 9 out of the 11 providers inside of the Gartner MQ are actually powered by Zerto. So 9 out of the 11, again, are trusting Zerto to protect their customers' data. So I think that's a really key stat. And I think the other one in there is Microsoft. And obviously we work with Microsoft Azure, and we have partners that are using DRaaS to Microsoft Azure very successfully as well. So you could even say potentially 10 out of the 11 if you take the Microsoft angle in there as well. We're offering the fastest RPOs and RTOs to all workloads and all companies, regardless of their size. So you don't have to be a Fortune 100 company to unlock these RPOs and RTOs. We have customers from small as 5, 10, 20 VM that are coming in and achieving seconds of RPO and minutes of RTO into these cloud environments, into these disaster recovery as a service portfolios, really unlocking those crucial SLAs, and quite often they're going to be backed financially by our service providers as well, because they trust Zerto so much. And I like a little bit of a cheesy line, and I think we are the DR in DRaaS, right? When we look at DRaaS providers around the world, I think we are the DR tool that is DRaaS. Our partners offer the as a service piece, but we're the piece that do the DR. So I just want to look at some enhancements we made in Zerto 9. So I covered kind of the enhancements we made earlier for ransomware, but a few here for our MSP partners. So we increased self-service functionality for our multi-tenant environment. So that's again putting some of the responsibility, or not even the responsibility, some of the actions into the user's hands. So if they want to be able to recover individual files, for instance, from their virtual machines, they haven't got to log a ticket. If they don't want to, they can log into the self-service portal and restore an individual virtual machine or an individual file from that virtual machine back into production if they'd wish to. So I think again, putting additional options onto the service provider's hands and allowing them to give something back to the user as well. We've increased our support for Cloud Director by VMware configuration, so a thing called Elastic Virtual Data Centers we've supported now. So we're hearing that from our customers. That was a requirement for this. So we've added that in for this year, and we've refactored some workflows. So we've made our RTO even faster in Cloud Director platforms as well. So again, some really key points there to increase functionality, increase performance for MSPs as well. So as some of you probably know, you've seen it around in the news, we did get acquired by HP this year. And they're putting us into their GreenLake platform, so the edge to cloud platform. And I would class this as disaster recovery as a service because it's it's on a consumption based, and we are in that disaster recovery and data migration piece inside of the GreenLake platform, so the cloud data services piece of the platform. So you can soon to come, you'll be able to buy Zerto through the GreenLake platform and consume Zerto through the GreenLake platform as well. So I think that's really exciting because the whole HP GreenLake is as a service, and we're going to be that disaster recovery and data migration as a service, part of the data protection as a service from HP GreenLake. So if we look at the next slide, perfect. So as I said, 100% consumption based there. So it's based on what you use, not what you think you're going to use. I think that's a really important point about disaster recovery as a service. So it's based on the actual workloads you're going to replicate. And again, unlocking best in breed RPO and RTO on a GreenLake platform, I think that's really crucial. Is that HP acquired us for a reason, obviously, because we are the best in breed technology in our class. So enabling all users of GreenLake to be able to unlock those best in class RPOs and RTOs. We're going to be having deep integrations into the GreenLake platform and their other supported offerings as well, so like the data services cloud console as well. So keep an eye out for those that are coming soon. And then, as I said before, disaster recovery, data mobility, and then ransomware protection, all as a service via GreenLake. So I think it's going to be really great for HP's GreenLake customers and their prospects as well. So that's me done for the DRaaS section. So I'll hand back to Caroline to kind of wrap things up, and you might be hear from me later in the Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. So just want to summarize up, and then we'll take some questions. And I know that Sam and Guido have actually been answering some of those already, and we've been sending some stuff through in the chat too with regards to some content for you to be able to use. But as a summary, we've talked today about 5 key predictions that we see in 2022. And as we look at our roadmap, as we look at what we deliver, we listen to you, our customers, as well as prospects and partners. And we have a lot of communication with analysts, and to ensure in the fact that we're focused on delivering what is needed to support the priorities that you have within your organization. So these 5 are the key ones that we see, which will continue through into 2022. Specifically the ransomware, we're seeing more and more the need to implement recovery strategies. Prevention alone is not enough. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you get attacked. Secondly, we've added in a huge number of enhancements, and we will continue to do so through 2022 as well. And we've added to the protection of SaaS workloads. So with the launch of Zerto Backup for SaaS, powered by Keepit, a very comprehensive solution protecting your Microsoft Dynamics, so Office 365 and Dynamics, Salesforce, and Google Workspace. And then in cloud data protection, it is on the rise, and we've just launched Zerto In-Cloud for AWS. But we also have a wealth of solutions too around in-cloud data protection. Next-gen data protection, we actually sort of talked about, and I do apologize, I realize that these are out of sequence, but they're still the top 5. The next gen data protection is the Zerto for Kubernetes that we launched this year, and we see that accelerating too. And then DRaaS, as Chris has just talked about, with regards to that increasing need to deliver disaster recovery as a service. And we're really excited about what we're doing with HP GreenLake to be delivered as a service as part of that as that platform itself. So when you look at our vision, and some of you may have seen this, we've shared this particular view of what we set out to do, and that's really protecting all workloads from cloud to edge. And this circle here, as we've been going through with all of the sort of the releases that we have this year, with Zerto 9, with the enhancements we've made from an MSP perspective to support our MSPs that you see here, to enhancing our cloud, our public cloud offerings, with Zerto In-Cloud, our immutability with AWS and additional enhancements, cloud tiering for Azure and AWS. And then with next gen protection too, with regards to the launch of Zerto for Kubernetes, which is the start of what organizations are looking at doing, is they're looking at microservices and so forth. And then we also launched Zerto Backup for SaaS to address the SaaS applications and protecting your SaaS data. And we continue to focus on the core tenets of what we deliver, and that's delivering that continuous availability, delivering enterprise class, so the scale and the simplicity. These are all very core to everything that we actually do. And so one of the things to help you if you want to actually try Zerto in different ways, we've added a lab to allow you to get hands-on experience recovering. So you can see Zerto in action recovering from a ransomware attack. So there's a lab for that. We introduced a new lab, the Zerto for Kubernetes, so that you can test out and see how Zerto works, Zerto for Kubernetes works from a containerized perspective, data protection there. And then we've just launched the Zerto for AWS lab, and we're going to, in Q1, launch another new lab, which is the Zerto In-Cloud for AWS. So really, I would say test drive Zerto. And it's self-paced and it's in your own environment. And so with that, I want to thank you, but I think we've got time to take some of the questions that have actually come in. And I know, Chris, I think you've been monitoring the questions as well. And thank you to Sam and Guido who've been answering some questions, but let's just see what else we've actually got. There's this presentation, by the way, will be available. That was one of the questions. There was a question about the Kubernetes and will it cover AKS deployments? And there's another question as well. So the Kubernetes, Zerto for Kubernetes, does support AKS, EKS. We just supported Tanzu, didn't we, Chris? Just recently, I think about in September too. And we support OpenShift. Oh, what are the ones I'm forgetting, Chris? Can you remember?
Google Cloud, Kubernetes Engine, and the and IBM Container Services as well.
That's right. Yes. So those, and there'll be more to come. That's on the roadmap, and you'll see more in 2022. And so there was a couple of questions here. How often can you back up copy to the long-term retention storage? I'm going to say forever, but maybe Chris, you want to add a bit more technical aspect to that?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two aspects. So how frequently can we do it? So I think Sam had a great answer in the chat actually. But no, it's great. So so inside the UI we back up daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, as you would expect on a normal backup schedule. But actually through the CLI or the API, you're actually allowed to. You can actually trigger those as often as you like. So you could do them every hour if you wanted to, through the API or through the CLI as well. And then for retention, the retention on those backup sets are completely down to customer choice. So again, they could be forever, they could be for a period of time, 7 years, whatever it may be as well. But yeah, for the storage retention, that could be for as long as the customer chooses.
Great. Oh, and there was another one around instant recovery, and what platforms is it available?
So instant recovery is available on our on VMware and Hyper-V platforms at the moment. So the on-premises, it's a replication to self. So you do like a local replication, and that's available inside of those platforms currently.
Great. I'm just looking here. There was a question about immutability copy available on Azure, so that's on the roadmap for 2022. So that is coming. Can you address the licensing question for Kubernetes, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, we don't license by virtual machines or anything else like that, or even by the number of worker nodes. We like to give a nice flexible model, so it's based on the number of vCPUs of the worker nodes. So that we're now not going to limit how you have to architect your nodes to fit a licensing model essentially. So we're not saying to you, if you had, if we licensed on a per node basis, people would have huge worker nodes because they'd have smaller licenses, or if you were doing it on on number of VMs, you'd have big VMs for less work nodes. We're doing it on the number of vCPUs, so it's down to a customer or a user to decide if they want smaller worker nodes but more of them, or large worker nodes and fewer of them. It's completely down to them, but the licensing will work out roughly the same across that flexible way of working.
Great. Actually, that's a good question, and I think it's an important one to clarify too. So thank you for asking this one. Will Zerto be available outside of the GreenLake platform as well? And that's an important one because we're very excited that we're part of the GreenLake, which will give an additional way for people to be able to consume and use Zerto as a service within the platform. Absolutely, is it available as is today, and it will continue to be so. So there is absolutely no change from that, and we have a full roadmap that we are developing to support. So yeah, absolutely. Let me see.
I think there was a great question about, can Zerto be used only for enterprise, or can it be used to support SMBs? And I think it's a great question. A lot of our stuff is I say enterprise focused, but large environment focused. But we work just as well at the SMB or the mid-sized market as well, and anywhere in between, as Sam mentioned earlier. But especially if you're looking at SMB, those DRaaS providers and our service providers that we have can often offer great technology enhancements for those SMB environments where they maybe don't have secondary sites or don't have large data centers that disperse. That's where public cloud or disaster recovery as a service using Zerto can really come into its own for those smaller SMB markets or mid-market environments as well.
Great. And just a reminder for folks, because a couple of people did ask about the recording on this session, so on demand. So a couple of things. The recording will be available post the event, and the copy of the slides will be available too. And I think a couple of people were having problems with the PDFs that are shared. They cannot be downloaded, so we'll sort that and make sure that post event that you will get copies as well of the PDFs, because we provided copies of the Zerto In-Cloud, as well as also Zerto for Kubernetes, Zerto Backup for SaaS. So there were several that were shared throughout the presentation, so apologies around that. Okay, so let me take a look at some of the, I think there's a question about which hypervisors are supported and is available to cloud. Could be related to the how often you back up copy to the long-term retention storage. So maybe just briefly, Chris, talk about the backup to the cloud, which platforms we support, because you talked about, well, we talked about AWS, didn't we? And we talked about S3 we've added, and then what other long-term storage do we have?
Yeah, so long-term, absolutely. So long-term retention can be stored in a multitude of ways. So in public cloud, we support Amazon S3 and Azure blob storage. We also support things that we have with the S3 protocol. So things like Cloudian, but also things like Wasabi I've tested successfully. That's worked pretty well. I'm sure there's a multitude of other ones that I haven't thought of. But also, purpose-built backup appliances. So data domains or HP Store Once devices, we support on premises as well as HP Cloud Volumes. And also NFS and NSMB repositories as well. So, simple NFS repo on premise we can support for long-term retention as well. So giving you a choice of where you'd like to store your data for long-term retention.
Thanks, Chris. And we're at 11:59. So just quickly, the John did actually repost the PDF, so you should be able to access that. But we are at time. So really appreciate your time today, and I hope you found the information useful. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager or reach out to Zerto. And so with that, thank you, Chris, for helping me out today, which was great.
It's been a pleasure.
And I just want to wish everybody happy Christmas, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, or whatever you actually celebrate. So hope that you have a very good holiday season. So thank you so much.